Hi, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to today's Infinite Learning webinar. My name is Rebecca Anand. I'm the managing partner and co-founder of Infinite Learning, and we're joined again this week by Mandy King. Delighted to welcome you back, Mandy. The theme and topic title of her webinar today is Achieving Greater Depth in Writing in Primary School. Now, this webinar introduces the CPD courses of the same name, which will be split according to key stage. So there's one for key stage 1, and there's also Achieving Greater Depth at key stage 2. So the webinar today will explore the characteristics of our more able writers. It details the aims of the courses coming up and what participants can expect to gain. It's also going to offer some samples of how a text might be used to inspire creativity. I'm sure you know this, and I'm sure that's why you're here, but this course is aimed at primary leaders, teachers and teaching assistants. We welcome you all today. Now, before I hand over to Mandy, let me just go over some of the housekeeping bits and pieces again. At the moment, you're all on listen-only mode, we'll allow Mandy to deliver her presentation in full, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end. So you should be able to see in your on the side of your screen the chat function, so please use that to ask any questions related to the content that Mandy is presenting today. If I can just preempt some of the more administrative questions that you may have. Yes, there is a recording of the webinar, and that will be sent to you tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock. Yes, there is a PDF of today's PowerPoint, and that will be sent to you immediately after this webinar in an email, along with details and booking links for the related courses. And yes, there is a certificate, and that is issued automatically with the video follow-up email tomorrow. There is also a poll where we just ask for a very quick piece of feedback, and it would be great if you could just take a couple of minutes to give that to us. Okay, so I think that's it from me for now. So, Mandy, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Rebecca. And again, it's lovely to be back, albeit virtually, in Dubai. Today, as Rebecca says, we are looking at achieving greater depth in writing. And this refers to the English national curriculum, or the national curriculum in England, I should say. One of my roles here is a senior moderator. So I work every summer in primary schools and secondary schools, reviewing the samples of children's writing and generally agreeing the teachers' decisions about greater depth, expected standard, and working towards expected standard. So I have a lot of experience in appraising writing and knowing what is required in order to achieve these different standards in writing. Achieving greater depth is undoubtedly the hardest to achieve because only a small minority of the children will be at this standard. But sometimes teachers are a little reluctant to give greater depth because they're worried that the children have perhaps not been consistent, or they're showing that they're able, but will they be able to sustain it into the next year? So we're going to have a little look at the characteristics of able writers, and we'll have a quick look at what we can expect from the courses and how the course will help to build your confidence to spot your greater depth writers, to recognise the evidence that will go towards their achievement of greater depth, and also to give you some ideas about how you might inspire that greater depth writing. So let's look at what we actually mean by working at greater depth. So pupils who are working at greater depth generally understand pretty firmly what is required of them in the for the objectives that are expected for that year group. They've got a firm understanding of what is being taught. They're not finding it overly challenging to take that learning on board. So what we're looking for in greater depth is that they're able to take and apply that learning, that they can explore it, they can go sideways with it. It is not about simply being able to access some of the work from the next year up. It is more about demonstrating that that skill, that understanding, that knowledge is firmly embedded and applicable across a range of contexts without too many tiers, if you like. So as it says at the bottom here, a greater depth writer has a real understanding of the writer's craft and is developing their own style. They're able to say, okay, I know what's required of me here. I think I'll do this as well. Oh, I know how to do that. Oh, I've read a book that does this. I'll borrow from that style because I have found it to be effective. So they're really taking what you teach them and adding to it. They're adding to it from their own experience, their own style, their own reading. So let's have a look now at what we think characteristics of more able writers might be. So I'm going to show you a slide that has a number of statements on it, which could be considered to be characteristics of able children. And your job is to decide which are the essential ones, which are the ones that you think, yeah, absolutely, you would need that in order to be a greater depth writer. And then maybe in your own time afterwards, think about which of those essential attributes your own pupils possess. Are there some that you think, oh, actually they're there and I need to foster them a little bit? Or, I don't know whether they've got that or not. I need to find out, I need to explore. And the other thing I would like you just to hold in the back of your heads is, are there children in your class who could be more able writers, who could be greater depth, but they're flying below the radar at the moment? I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean in a minute, but let's have a look. I'm going to go silent for a little while. I'll show you the slide. I might just quickly read through the statements in case you can't read them clearly from wherever you are, but then I'm going to go silent for a little while and leave you to cogitate, and then I'll come back in and start talking again. So here we are. On the first bubble there, we've got highly motivated, able to argue and reason, accurate spelling, clear understanding of audience and purpose, by which I mean that when they write, they know who they're writing for and why they are writing it. They read widely, independently, and with enjoyment. They're imaginative and creative. They make use of vocabulary, ideas, and structure from their own reading. They have neat, legible, joined handwriting, wide and sophisticated vocabulary. They maintain concentration and persist with challenging tasks. They edit and proofread without prompting. They're not dependent upon models provided by you, the teacher. Now, what I mean by that is they're not dependent on it. That doesn't mean they're not part of that modelling, but they are not expecting, or you don't see them copying it word for word or sticking very closely to it. Accurate and effective use of grammar and punctuation, and an ability to transfer learning to new contexts. So remember, what you're looking for now is which of those would you consider to be essential? And then in time, in your own time, have a think about your own pupils and decide whether A, there are some gaps in your assessment of them that you need to explore, and B, are there any other children who you think, maybe they could be greater depth if I just gave them a little extra support or a bit of a prod. Okay, so I'm going to go silent for a couple of minutes and let you have a little look at these statements and have a think. That's about a minute, so I'll give you another minute. Okay. Now, you may not have had time to fully take all of those or the implication of those on board, but obviously I can't talk to you. I can't hear you. I can't have a discussion with you about what you think. So I'm going to have to make certain assumptions about the things that you might have been saying. I'm going to start with highly motivated. It is the case that many able writers are excited by writing and enjoy it and get on with it, and will often go above and beyond what you have asked them to do. But it isn't always the case. Some children who are very able are afraid of exposing themselves in making mistakes. And so they don't always come across as highly motivated until something suddenly sparks their imagination and they really can't help themselves. So sometimes, and this is why I'm saying you may have children flying under the radar. They may actually be perfectly able writers, but or very able writers, but they're just not showing you really what they can do. So we need to use some of these other characteristics to see if we can tease them out. And once we have teased them out, maybe then think about what would excite them, what would really float their boat so that they will absolutely be ignited and get on with a piece of writing that will really show you the full extent of their ability. And this is also why I'm saying that sometimes we're a bit reluctant to give children greater depth, because they will write extremely well when they are interested in something and not terribly well if they're not. And it just gives us this mismatch of evidence. So it's about teasing them out. It's about finding what it is that really gets them going, and see if we can get that greater consistency of evidence. Now, some of these others will depend on the age. If you've got little dots, if we're talking about greater depth in year 1 and year 2, then they might not be arguing and reasoning at this stage, but you know that they can at least give you an opinion. If you ask them if they enjoy a story, they can generally tell you why. They can generally give you a reason why something has made them laugh or something has made them feel sad and so on. So there might be the embryo of that there without it necessarily being fully formed when they are little. We're not going to go through all of these, but I'm just going to pick up a few. I will say, and this is often one that I do have a debate about with colleagues, reads widely, independently, and with enjoyment. Generally, able writers do read widely, and they do read independently. It's an unusual able writer. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's an unusual able writer who doesn't read widely because they can't manage just on what they get in school to show that full range of their skills. So they are going to be drawing on the vocabulary, the structures, the ideas that they get when they read independently. So while you may have one or two children who are able writers, but they don't enjoy reading very much, generally that's not the case. I will say they do need a good understanding of audience and purpose. So if you've got able writers who aren't doing that yet, then that's possibly a focus for your teaching, to really get them to identify, who am I writing for? Why would I be writing this? And how is this going to impact on the choices that I make as a writer? Now let's go to the other end. Let's have a look at some of the things that they might not have and yet still be able writers. Now that one in the middle, neat, legible, joined handwriting. You and I all know children who are extremely able, who have the most appalling handwriting. It is not a deal breaker when it comes to able writers, although when it comes to judging them at the end of key stages, there is something that we need to think about here, because it is one of the criteria. But it is not a deal breaker. However, it is important that we work on neat, legible, joined handwriting, because if children aren't worrying about it, if it's not holding them back, they can spend their time on their creativity, and they will perhaps write in a greater volume if they're not worrying too much about it, if their writing is a bit more fluent. Similarly, spelling. Spelling, again, there are very able, creative, exciting writers who are poor spellers. So again, it's not a given that they must be accurate spellers in order to be greater depth. Although, as I say, there is a conversation to be had around the criteria. But we need to look at why they are not spelling well. Is it because they have got a specific learning difficulty with it that we can support? Is it that they're just being a little bit lazy, in which case we need to deal with it? It's not acceptable. Or is there something else that we need to be looking at? Is it just a gap in learning? Is it a gap in teaching? And we need to plug it. Now, the thing is, if children aren't accurate spellers, it is not unusual for them to avoid more ambitious vocabulary in their writing, and they will choose big over titanic or enormous. So that's what will hold them back, or what can hold them back from becoming greater depth writers, if the spelling actually gets in the way of their composition or gets in the way of the readability for the audience. So I suppose, in short, what we're saying is all of these criteria here have an impact on greater depth writing, but some are probably more essential than others. But use this now to have a think about where your children are at. I would just, before I leave this slide, just put a little plug in for editing and proofreading. This is a skill that needs to be taught. So children are not going to edit and proofreading without prompting if they haven't been taught how to edit and proofread. So some of these things are to do with where we can focus our teaching, and some of these are to do with helping us to identify who is or could be a greater depth writer. Okay, let's move on a little bit and have a look at what these course aims are. Well, obviously, with my moderator's hat on, one of the things that I want you to be able to get from this course is that familiarity with the key stage criteria for greater depth. Whether or not you do the testing at the end of key stages, you will always be teacher assessing. And some of those criteria take a little bit of unpicking. They take a little bit of understanding in terms of precisely what do we mean by formality, the ability to choose the appropriate register and so on. Having increased your familiarity, I want us to be able to look at high quality texts and how we might use those texts to make the links between the spoken language, the reading and writing that's going to lead to high quality, greater depth writing. And I will also be showing you examples of writing that satisfy those criteria at the end of key stages. Not just the ones that you can find online, but I have access to some others as well. And we'll have a look at those and see in hard copy, if you like, what greater depth writing can look like. Obviously, each sample is going to be unique to that child, but it will give you a sense of what qualifies as evidence of the greater depth standards. And then finally, and this is, I think, quite exciting as a result of being able to have the course spread over a series of weeks, I hope that it will give you the opportunity to gather some evidence of greater depth within your own classes, which we can then share at the end and have a professional discussion about what evidence a particular piece of writing is offering and where there might still be gaps that we need to fill, or what the next steps might be in order to consolidate that learning and develop it further. And I think, as I say, that's a really exciting opportunity that's afforded us by having the course online, because it gives you that chance to have a little bit of the input and go away and apply what we have talked about, gather your evidence, come back, and then have the benefit of that professional conversation. You can expect to come away with that increased understanding. And as I suggested at the beginning, greater confidence in identifying that evidence and feeling confident that you can argue your case when another colleague says, you've said this child is greater depth. Tell me how you've come to that conclusion. That you can then pull the evidence out and say, well, look at this, look at this. They can do this. Okay, this wasn't so good in this piece, but look at how they managed it in these later pieces. I do want to help you to increase your inspiration for writing and for the writing of the children. And to be fair, I would also like you to contribute what you use, because the experience is often in the room, isn't it? You've got your ideas, you've got examples of good texts which other colleagues might well benefit from hearing about. So I'll share but I would like you to share too. And then finally, as I say, that exciting opportunity of being able to review samples of writing from your school, so that we can share and talk and discuss. And that's going to be helpful for everybody, because it helps us to get some parity, some clarity of understanding that what we're saying is greater depth is the same as what another teacher in another school is saying is greater depth. Now, I thought we would finish today's webinar with a look at a very straightforward text, but I'm just going to give you some suggestions about how I would use what seems to be, as I say, a very simple text to inspire my children to write imaginatively and creatively and independently. So this poem is called 10 Things Found in a Shipwrecked Sailor's Pocket, and it's by a poet called Ian Macmillan, and it's from a publication called The Very Best of Ian Macmillan. Now, Ian Macmillan has written a number of 10 Things poems, and in the book, The Very Best of Ian Macmillan, there is, on the facing page, another book called 10 Things Found in a Wizard's Pocket. I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, just in case you can't see the screen clearly, I am going to read the poem to you. So, 10 things found in a shipwrecked sailor's pocket. A litre of sea. An unhappy jellyfish. A small piece of a lifeboat. A pencil wrapped around with seaweed. A soaking feather. The first page of a book called Swimming is Easy. A folded chart showing dangerous rocks. A photograph of a little girl in a red dress. A gold coin. A letter from a mermaid. Now, if I were using this with my class, I would start by doing a think aloud in terms of helping them to see this not just as a list of noun phrases, which is what it is, but in terms of comprehending the audience, the purpose, the motivation behind writing this poem. So I would do something like this. I'm getting the impression of a sailor who has literally just come out of the sea. He's landed on dry land and he's standing up and he's got one of these huge waxed seaman's jackets on. And that's why the pockets are still full of water. That's why there is that litre of sea in each of the pockets. And he's standing on this, I'm imagining a sort of a desert island with sand and palm trees, and he's standing there looking absolutely drenched and forlorn. And the other thing that's giving me that impression is that idea of that unhappy jellyfish. I can just imagine that jellyfish peeping out of the pocket and thinking, what's happened? Now, the other impression I'm getting is that he has been shipwrecked more than once, because in his pocket is a small piece of a lifeboat. Now, you only get into a lifeboat if your ship is sinking. So that first ship has sunk, and now he's in a lifeboat, or he got into a lifeboat, and now that's broken up as well because he's got a small piece in his pocket. So he's very unlucky. Or is he actually a bit incompetent? Because he's got the first page of a book called Swimming is Easy in his pocket. Now, would you go to sea if you didn't know how to swim? That doesn't sound very wise to me. And the other thing that I think makes him somewhat incompetent is the folded chart showing dangerous rocks. Maybe if that hadn't been in his pocket, he wouldn't have been shipwrecked in the first place. I wonder if he was meant to be navigating And instead of looking at the folded chart with the dangerous rocks, he was actually reading his letter from a mermaid and maybe thinking about that little girl in a red dress. So maybe he really wasn't concentrating. And I wonder, therefore, whether the other sailors were a bit angry with him. Maybe that's why he's only got one gold coin in his pocket instead of a whole purse full of gold coins. Maybe that one gold coin is all the other sailors thought that he was worth. Now, I'm going to come out of that now. You may have a different impression of that sailor. When you read it with your children, when you do your think aloud, you might do something completely different. That's fine. This is about showing children how you make sense of something that has been written and how you build a picture from just a list of things, what that character might be like. Now, this is important because if we now want the children to go on and do their own piece of writing, we need them to have that background thinking, that ability to say, who am I going to write about? What's that person like? How is that therefore going to impact on what they have in their pocket? Now, I mentioned that on the facing page of this particular book, there is another poem, 10 Things Found in a Wizard's Pocket. So the next thing I would do, having done a think aloud with this poem, is encourage the children to do the same thing with the other poem. Sit in their groups, have a chat, think about what impression of the wizard they have. Is he a good wizard? Is he a bad wizard? Is he an evil wizard? Is he a very clever wizard? There are all sorts of things that they might come up with, and different groups will have different ideas, and all of that is fine. All of that's acceptable because it's about the conversation. It's about understanding what gives us that impression. And after that, what I would do is encourage them children to think about who else might have an interesting pocket. They might come up with an astronaut. They might come up with a teacher, a naughty boy. They might come up with a policeman, a cowboy, a referee of a football match. They might come up with all kinds of things. It's absolutely fine. I'd make a great long list of all their suggestions and stick it up somewhere in the classroom, because what I will want to encourage them to do is to take what we've talked about now and apply it to somebody else. I would like to demonstrate, so I'll pick one and I will demonstrate, now what might this person have in his pocket? And we might list some nouns of things that could reasonably be there. But then I would be encouraging them to think, okay, now what's this person like? Let's take the example of the referee. He'll have a red card in his pocket. He'll have a yellow card. Now, is he a kind referee? Is he a reasonable referee, or is he a bit mean? If he's a bit mean, the chances are the red card is going to be much more dog-eared than anything else in his pocket. It will have been in and out of his pocket pretty regularly. He might have, that mean referee might have a whistle with a particularly shrill sound. So all of those things are going to be relevant in our discussion, but I really want to get the children thinking in depth. I don't want them to go away, just think of 10 things, stick an adjective in front and say, there you are, I've done my poem. I want it to be the best it can be, and I want them to have thought about who they're writing for, what they are writing about, and what impression they want that writing to have on the reader. After I demonstrated, I would then encourage the children to choose their own person and go away and have the best possible go. Go back, have a look, is there anything that we can improve? Make sure that they edit it and publish it in the best possible way. And then we might have a little competition then to read the poems out and get the rest of the class to tell us about that person, give us our impression of what they think the author of that poem was trying to achieve, so that we're getting that feedback, we're getting that discussion about the quality of the writing. And I would definitely be sharing these with parents, so that there's a real purpose, there's a real reason for the children to be writing. And that's a very, very quick overview of the kinds of activities that we might do on the course. We'll also look at where the grammar fits in, and you can see from this poem that this is a golden opportunity to explore noun phrases and the precision of noun phrases. So we'll look at that as well. But I hope that's given you a little bit of a flavour of the kinds of things that you can expect. And I look forward to seeing lots of you on the course in January. As Rebecca says, Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2. We split the course into those 2 key stages so that we can look at age-appropriate texts and samples of writing. But now I'm just going to invite you through, Rebecca, to ask any questions. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Yet another exciting and engaging webinar. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas. I think everyone has absolutely been engaged, because we don't have any questions in the question panel as yet. So I will mumble away here for a few minutes and just see if we do. I loved your comment about the knowledge is one of the things we always say when we're facilitating the NPQs. We talk about the knowledge being in the room and then the experience being in the room. And absolutely, with the pros and cons of online learning, we've seen many of on both sides. But as we were discussing earlier before everyone joined, Mandy, some of the benefits are that you can do a blended learning, and you can do a sandwich course and give people nuggets of information, ideas that they can take into the classroom, and then you can come back and share and see how that worked. And that professional dialogue is a real bonus of this model, actually. So I'm glad that you did that. And I just think generally this course is so needed. There's quite rightly a lot of focus and courses aimed at those that are less able and need more support, and that's quite right and proper. But equally, those at the other end of the spectrum need stretching, and it's great to see a course such as this on offer. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of people interested in hopefully signing up for this. Guys, do please add any questions in the chat area. If you can't think of anything right now, but you do think of something afterwards, please do let us know. We have a question that came in after our phonics and spelling webinar from last week. I was rather blown away by Mandy's detailed reply. She's extremely generous with her time, and she really genuinely does want to sort of share the knowledge and really help and support us with the literacy side of things. So do let us know. Just to remind again, you will get an email straight after today's webinar with a copy of the PowerPoint. And tomorrow you'll receive a video and a certificate, and there's also a little questionnaire there for you. Just some feedback for us would be really useful. So as Mandy said, the related courses to this webinar are running in January, so there is time, but do take a look on the website and you'll see that the courses are split according to Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And the cohorts start from mid-February. Okay, so do have a look at our website there, and you can go to the virtual learning area and you'll find out all the information there. Our next webinar is also actually on primary literacy with a different provider called Philip Davis, and he's talking about focusing on creativity with primary literacy. So actually very related to what Mandy's just been talking about in many ways. It's called Write Inspired Beyond the Blank Page. And that's happening on Monday, the 23rd of November at 4 o'clock, so just under a week's time. So do sign up for that one as well. I can't see any questions that have come in, so I'm assuming that you've all been wowed and you're either just sort of reflecting, or your questions will come to you at some later date. So if you share those, get in touch with us and we can forward those to Mandy. Any questions about any other the primary literacy training that you might like with Mandy. She's also available to do in-school training. We're doing quite a lot of that now with our trainers, where they're doing a bespoke program just for your team in your school. So also get in touch if that's of interest. Until then, a big thank you again to Amanda King. Thank you very much for your time, and to all of you for attending. I hope you found it beneficial, and I wish you all a lovely evening. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.